Coming up on Network Africa. 22 people killed in a building collapse in the Moroccan city of Fez. M23 rebels reportedly headed towards the eastern DRC, forcing thousands to flee into Burundi. Welcome everyone and thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. It's been a Black Wednesday in Morocco following the building collapses in the city of Fez, which killed 22 people and injured 16 others. Two four-story residential buildings came down in the early hours of today. It contained 8 families. Fez is one of Morocco's oldest cities, with parts dating back to the 8th century. It is also the 3rd most populous city in Morocco. Search and rescue is underway to find anyone still under the rubble. Several media clips show people digging and sifting through debris in the dark. Residents from nearby buildings have been evacuated as a preventive measure. The peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda is being threatened with more reports of M23 rebel activities across the border into the DRC as they headed towards the city of Uvira. U.S. President Donald Trump brokered a peace deal signed by leaders of both countries last week, but fighting has continued. Residents and military sources say soldiers and residents have been fleeing the assault on the last government-held city in the mineral-rich region and entering into nearby Burundi. Shops and schools are shut as a result, and terrified residents are staying indoors amid fears that rebels have taken control of some government buildings. However, South Kivu Governor Jean-Jacques Peroussi dismissed reports that the rebels were in the city as completely unfounded rumors. While the violence continues between the DRC and Rwanda, the M23 rebels have stressed they have no intentions of attacking nearby Burundi, calling on them to call off the deployment of troops to the DRC. M23 rebel leader Bertrand Bissiwa made the announcement at a press conference in Goma. He warned that by deploying troops on Congolese soil in support of the criminal coalition of the Kinshasa regime, the Burundian government has taken on the heavy responsibility of directly engaging in unjustifiable war against our people. Their words. The M23 rebels have been advancing on the town of Uvira near the Burundian border. They say delegation will be leaving for Doha soon for a new round of talks. In other parts of Africa, Sudan remains one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises, dealing with issues such as escalating conflict, rise in hunger, and the highest level of child displacement in the world. An estimated 10 million people have been displaced, half of them children, and more than 30 million people require humanitarian assistance. UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell has called for urgent action to safeguard children and essential services on her visit to the country. Somalia is not faring any better. The UN's resident coordinator for the country, George Conway, says the country suffers from cyclical crises, including droughts, floods, and persistent conflict. He says the UN is accelerating long-term development work rooted in the government's new National Transformation Plan. The plan, launched earlier this year, lays out a vision to transform governance, to boost the economy, to invest more in human capital development, and to strengthen adaptation and resilience to the climate crisis.
Somalia suffers from cyclical crises, including droughts, floods, and persistent conflict. So the UN, over the past year, has continued to support humanitarian responses when necessary in response to what we now have as a current failed rainy season, which is causing food insecurity to rise, causing child malnutrition to rise in various parts of the country. So we are focused on life-saving. As importantly, however, in our development mandate, we focus on resilience building and supporting the government's own national development strategies and plans. In this case, we supported the government to develop its National Transformation Plan, as it's called, which was launched earlier this year, which sets out a bold vision for the country to transform governance, to boost the economy, to invest more in human capital development, and to strengthen adaptation and resilience to the climate crisis. So in the two river basins in the country that are prone to flooding, the infrastructure is old and needs significant repair and rehabilitation. So we've been working with other partners to improve irrigation canals, but also marshalling a national flagship program to rehabilitate water storage structures across the country. Those will allow water to be better managed when it happens to prevent floods, and it will likewise better manage water when drought happens in order to continue without interruption to the agricultural production cycles. The UN system is in transformation right now, and this is certainly the case in Somalia. Right now, we have a political mission, UNTMIS, that is phasing down over the course of the next 12 months. And this will mean a new a new role for the UN country team and for the agency funds and programs and for the resident coordinator.
As the dust settles over the attempted coup in Benin Republic, the French government says it provided surveillance, observation and logistical assistance to the armed forces to help fend off Sunday's mutiny. President Emmanuel Macron is said to have led coordination efforts and had spoken to the Benin Republic President, Patrice Talon, as well as representatives of ECOWAS. It also joined ECOWAS in condemning the attempt to destabilize Benin Republic and ordered its full political support to the regional body. Speaking of the ECOWAS, the community on Tuesday declared a state of emergency across the region. The ECOWAS Commission President Omar Toure made the announcement at the 55th session of the Mediation and Security Council in Abuja. His reason for doing this, he says, is because the region now faces an average high-risk security rating, citing recent military interventions in Guinea-Bissau and Benin, stalled political transitions in Guinea, growing electoral exclusion, and the expanding reach of terrorists and criminal networks.
The 55th session of the ECOWAS Mediation and Security Council opens in Abuja amid security challenges within the region, including military coups, violent extremism, and food insecurity. Diplomats and senior officials, including Nigeria's Minister of Defense, General Christopher Musa, are attending the meeting to consider the escalating political and security threats across the region. The meeting focuses on assessing country-by-country security risk, safeguarding democratic systems, and preparing for key elections in Guinea, Benin, and the Gambia, and Cape Verde. It also seeks to boost regional coordination against terrorism and organized crime.
Events of the last few weeks have shown the imperative of serious introspection on the future of our democracy and the urgent need to invest in the security of our community. Elections have become a major trigger of instability in our community. Despite the best of efforts of our community to establish constitutional convergence principles and to have a support program for elections in our region in order to safeguard our democratic credentials and stability, we have continued to witness political practices that violate some of these principles.
According to the Commission, the region faces a worsening humanitarian crisis driven by conflicts and political instability, leading to the displacement of over 7.6 million people, food insecurity, which may force millions to hunger, prompting urgent calls for action to protect vulnerable populations.
Our region continues to see grim numbers on the humanitarian front. Behind these numbers are families, women and children who bear the brunt of instability. We must therefore take decisions and actions that will reverse this trend.
The political and security climate across the community is becoming more fragile, and our citizens are understandably very anxious. The discussions we have today must move beyond just reaffirming principles. They must generate decisions that offer real hope and strengthen the credibility of our institutions.
The Council is expected to issue strong security and governance recommendations to the heads of state and government, who are expected to meet later in the week to protect communities, preserve regional unity, and restore stability. Benny Ark, Channels Television News.
I want to bring in now former Nigerian ambassador to Benin Republic, Ambassador Lawrence Obishakin. He joins us from Abuja. Ambassador, thank you for joining us on the program today. We can barely hear you. I think you are muted, Ambassador. Right.
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, so ECOWAS has declared a state of emergency, it says, across the region. This is the first time for many of us we're hearing this. I mean, I know that protocol has been followed in the past, but in a very long time, we really haven't seen this protocol being triggered in ECOWAS. What does this mean for the region?
Well, we need to define what is a state of emergency first. Even by ordinary Merriam-Webster dictionary, it's a boiling point. It's a crisis point. And the ECOWAS spokesperson had told us clearly, the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Umar Toure, has explained why this was triggered. That they have done a country-by-country analysis of instability, and they have come to a conclusion that they needed to declare a state of crisis, that the issue of instability has reached a very high risk level. Country by country analysis even shows that averagely the instability is high overall, and Nigeria is part of it. Of course, you know, Nigeria also is in a crisis of instability, of terrorism. We have this, and when you look at the immediate past 2-3 weeks, there has been 2 coups. One attempted, one is virtually successful, the one in Guinea-Bissau. And then our closest neighbor here, with which we share 6 ethnic groups, we share about 800 kilometers of border. There was an attempted coup. But thank God, ECOWAS has intervened. Nigeria was approached, constitutional rules were followed, and Nigeria intervened. And our gallant soldiers were successful in returning Benin Republic to the constitutionality, the path of constitutionality. So the implication of this is that there's serious instability in our region. When you look at it, Nigeria is almost surrounded now by military, you know, unconstitutional governance. We're talking of Niger, talking of even not almost immediate neighbor, Burkina Faso. And you know, the issue of Chad, which is not ECOWAS, but is the Nigerian neighbor. So I think it should be a welcome decision for Nigeria and for ECOWAS. But the problem would be, how effective will it be? What assets are they bringing? Because if there is a demonstration of hostility by what happened in Burkina Faso. The normal protocol was followed by our military. There was an emergency, and they had to land on the closest tarmac, which they did. But look at what, you know, the communique that Burkina Faso brought us. It's indicative of hostility towards, you know, Nigeria or its assets.
Yeah, it's a great thing that you actually pointed that out, because I was going to ask, you know, how this would impact on those AES countries. But then Nigeria already has received approval from the Senate to deploy the standby force. And we know that, you know, they'll be joining other ECOWAS countries, at least 4 of them, who will also be providing troops to this standby force. What exactly is their mandate? If they're being on standby, does this mean that if there is another attempted military takeover of power, they intervene in the countries, they enforce civilian rule in the countries, or what exactly would they be doing?
Well, regional organizations are established to do what practically the individual member state could not do. And you know, there's power in number. Even though Nigeria is the biggest country here, yet we have these, power of multilateral organizations. One of my professors told me that if you want to deal with a country without people, blaming your country, take it to the multilateral organizations and tell them that my hands are tied. It was a collective decision. So it's a collective decision that we're talking about. You remember ECOWAS, how it went effectively to fight in Liberia, to fight in Sierra Leone. So the standby force is a force that the countries of member states donate, just like the United Nations peacekeeping forces. You give, but then they have a common, signals, they have a common, but usually countries want to command their own contingent, but then they are under the same rules of engagement, and they will have a commander-in-chief for it, that will be the overall, these are military terms, you have your contingent, but then you have the same rule of engagement and you have the same target. But I think that it's a good thing. It has worked, at least somehow. Nigeria, it was an emergency, and Nigeria had to come in, and we are hearing now that France also said it chipped in certain things, even though it's a colonial master. And it is very significant. I think Benin Republic was the first to return to civilian regime after the spate of military, takeover. And it was the first to return to, democracy. And now for it to be torpedoed, especially for a government that we observe. I spent 9 years in Benin after my stint as ambassador. I now went to also represent my church there for about 5 years. So we know that President Talon generally has done very well in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, although for every democracy, you always have those who are not satisfied. You always have an opposition. In fact, it's a mark of democracy. But when I look at what Benin has done, compared with other countries, it has done very well. And I think at the time, the GDP growth rate was being indicated, was marked at about 9 to 10%. So, and at the time, Nigerian, companies were moving to Benin.
Ambassador, I'm sensing this should lead to a broader discussion. So we will have you back on the program. Unfortunately, we have to cut the conversation short here. But thank you so much. Appreciate you graciously obliging us today. Thank you for joining us on the program.
You're welcome, Marachi. A wonderful day. Bye.
Let's go further south to Africa now. The South African minister in the presidency has announced that Cabinet has approved the draft revised white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection. Briefing the media in Pretoria, he said that under the new national security framework, refugees will be required to seek protection in the first safe country that they enter before reaching South Africa.
Cabinet has approved the draft revised white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection for public consultations. The revision builds on the final white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection approved by Cabinet in 2024, updating certain policy propositions and adding detailed guidance on proposals contained in the original version. Key enhancements of the white paper include integration of recommendations from Operation Vulindlela's report on visa policy reforms and additional clarity and detail to strengthen implementation of immigration and citizenship policies. The revised white paper aims to ensure a coherent, modernized approach to citizenship, immigration and refugee protection that supports national development and national security objectives, including the first safety country principle, which encourages refugees to seek protection in the first country they reach that is considered safe.
We're still in South Africa. The police in Mpumalanga have arrested an undocumented Zimbabwean national after discovering he had more than 500 passports and 20,000 rand on his person. The passports belonged to Malawian, Zimbabwean and Mozambican nationals. Some of them had wads of cash inside. It's believed the man was taking those passports to a border gate to be stamped on behalf of their owners. Police say the arrest came after they received a tip-off about the Zimbabwean man driving a white Chevrolet with a canopy carrying lots of passports and cash. Our correspondent Innocent Samosa joins us now. Innocent, this is not news you see every day from South Africa or elsewhere. Is this a common practice, this gentleman carrying 500 passports? Did he explain why he had that many on him? What plausible reason he may have given to the police to try to wriggle himself out of this situation?
Indeed, colleague, a very good evening to you and our viewers at home. Now the police says the man was on his way to a border post to get the passport stamped on behalf of their owners. Now we're hearing that, according to the police spokesperson in that province, that is Mpho Nonyane, she says that there was a tip-off that a Zimbabwean man driving a white Chevrolet utility bakkie with a canopy reportedly transporting large number of passports and money. And there was also a multidisciplinary team that was then dispatched, including the Middleburg Flying Squad, the Nkangala District Anti-Hijacking Units. It was everyone in the South African South African Police Services tracking down the vehicle, which had a Gauteng number plate. Now, we do know, going back to your question, colleague, we know that he's appearing in court on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Now, investigation so far, as I've indicated, it suggests that the driver was likely planning to meet someone the following day to get the passport stamped, colleague.
So is it a common practice for people who help to facilitate immigration of other nationals? Because obviously these people, after he gets a passport stamped, he'll take them back across the border again, and then those people will be emigrating into South Africa. How is the government curbing this?
Indeed, colleague, it's corruption, and it's something that the government has flagged before. The minister in the presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, was speaking there. In fact, she also spoke about the flights that came from Gaza, where people had passports that were not stamped to come to South Africa. So they're of a view that the system has been taken advantage of by the workers at Home Affairs. But I would imagine that this would need to be investigated. It is not common that we're hearing about this number, especially 500 passports. That's an enormous number, given the fact that it's different countries. It's not one country. It's 3 SADC countries. So it's really concerning. And the government has told members of the media today that they're indeed putting their hands on it. They will indeed investigate the Home Affairs staff and try to find out what really happened to this issue.
Yeah, because 500 passports will need a utility truck to carry those. It is a lot and it is heavy. Finally, Innocent, if you can, really quickly, a slight change in Parliament. We understand former President Jacob Zuma's daughter is being sworn in. How does it change, if it does, proceedings in Parliament and governance, and why the change in the first place?
Yeah, you would recall, colleague, that this comes at the back of the Duduzile Sambudla Zuma, who decided to step down pending the investigations of the 17 men that were basically recruited to fight in Russia as mercenaries in Ukraine. So she decided to step down. But the sworn in of Bremulda Zuma's appointment, really, to many people, colleague, here in South Africa, suggests that former President Zuma intends to ensure that his family is indeed represented in Parliament, given the fact that remember, the Concord could not give him a go-ahead to, to apply to be eligible to be in parliament. So it does seem as though he wants his family members to be in parliament, but we don't know what skills she's bringing. It remains to be seen what participation or what contributions she'll bring in parliament representing the MK party. Amarachi.
Interesting times in South Africa. Innocent, thank you for filling us in.
Thank you so much, colleague.
Finally on the program, did you know that almost 40% of adults in Africa are literate? 2/3 of them are women. Progress in improving literacy on the continent has been slow. In 1990, the proportion of adults who could not read and write stood at 48%, according to UNESCO statistics. And now you know. Thanks for watching Network Africa. I'm Amarachi Ubani.